Well, thank you very much for joining me today. Today we have the Deputy Mayor, First Deputy Mayor, Randy Mastro, for the Eric Adams administration, new to the position as of, I believe, last week.
No, I'm a 2-week veteran already.
Oh,
So
okay. Well, welcome. Welcome to the
Thank you.
city. Welcome
Pleasure.
back to the city, and welcome here. Thank you so much for joining us
My
here
pleasure.
today. And we have Deputy Chancellor Christina Foti joining us today as well. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it, and really looking forward to an excited to hear about your insights.
Thank you for having me, Tracey. Thank you.
Okay. So we'll start with the Deputy Mayor, and tell us a little bit about your background and what brought you to this position.
Well, that is a long and winding road. This is actually, my second rodeo in city government. I was a deputy mayor in an earlier administration 30 years ago, and essentially had this same position. So to come back now at this stage of my career is a special joy and privilege. I'm a lawyer by background, a trial lawyer. I've also taught you many, many years ago.
This is true.
And I never really thought I would be in city government. After law school, I went a more traditional route of clerking for a judge and then going to a prominent New York law firm. But I had this pull to government service, so I wanted to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York, where all the great trial lawyers would try to spend some time in their career. And it was there that I met a very effective crime-busting U.S. Attorney, Rudy Giuliani. After serving there, I became the lawyer to his campaign, and he actually got elected in 1993. And I went into his administration, first as his chief of staff and then as his deputy mayor. And it was an amazing period, a very difficult time in New York. People forget the state of New York in the early 1990s.
I remember it well.
Over 2,000 murders a year, hundreds of thousands of private sector jobs lost, a declining quality of life. Time magazine called us the rotting apple with a big picture of a decaying apple on its cover. It was a very difficult time. And to have seen the city come back in such a robust way and crime reduce so much and the economy improve so much and quality of life improve, it was a wonderful experience. But I was broke, so I returned to private practice and spent many years in private practice as a litigator, also doing pro bono matters and doing a lot of community service and being in many not-for-profit organizations, including Citizens Union and New York's preeminent good government group, nonpartisan, 125 years, going back to Tammany Hall days, taking on corruption in city government. So that was my methadone at the time. And at this stage, as a lawyer over 40 years, to have the chance to come back to city government in this capacity to help this administration, it's a special blessing in my life, and I'm thrilled to do it.
And what drives you to your commitment to public service? Because your career really demonstrates a commitment to public service over and over again. And what is it that draws you to public service?
Well, I think what drove me to become a lawyer in the first place, and almost a journalist before that, because I worked at the Washington Post before I went to law school. It's the sense of, it's a calling, and it's the sense that you want to do good, and that life is more important than just what you do for yourself. And I think it's why all of us, I think it's why the Deputy Chancellor has been drawn to her impressive career. We want to do good. We want to do something for the greater good. And there are opportunities to do that in life, in civic work and not-for-profit work and pro bono work as a lawyer. And I did a lot of pro bono work over the course of my legal career. But the most immediate way to have an effect is really to serve in government. As Teddy Roosevelt, one of my favorite presidents, said so famously. You can criticize the government, but if you want to do something about it, get in the arena. And I've gotten in the arena again. And it's a very exciting time. It's been 2 weeks and feels like yesterday.
And what has been perhaps the greatest influencers or influences on you to bring you into public service?
That's a really good question. So there are certain individuals who stand out in my consciousness, historical figures like Teddy Roosevelt, who was a crusading, trust-busting, really the first progressive to be president of the United States, and he was just an amazing example. His expression, "Speak softly and carry a big stick." I think I try to carry that big stick, but not necessarily so softly in the voice. But I think more than that, for me, was my father, who was a political science professor, taught me so much about politics. And while I didn't think I would ever apply that in my professional life, he was a great role model in that he always dedicated time to public service. He always dedicated time to helping outside the classroom. Many famous politicians in New Jersey. He taught at a little school called Drew University in Madison, New Jersey. But he developed certain techniques that helped a number of famous governors in New Jersey get elected. Christie Todd Whitman, Tom Kean, others. Techniques about how moderate Republicans in New Jersey were different than the mainstream Republican Party at the time. And, how they should campaign in Democratic strongholds because that's where the votes were, and expand the base. He was a brilliant, ahead of his time political thinker, but more importantly to me, he set an example of touching people's lives because as a teacher, he touched so many students' lives, and so many of them went into public service. And I guess in that way, he touched my life too, and inspired me to do that, even though he devoted most of his career to teaching. In my little hometown, I grew up where my father was the head of the town council, and they had honorary positions. He was also the police commissioner, just a title. And my uncle was the mayor for 12 terms. So I had these role models. I couldn't go down Main Street in high school without a police escort. So maybe that kept me on the straight and narrow, but maybe it also inspired me to go into public service.
You've also taught as well, like your father. You served as a professor, didn't you?
I did. I taught at the esteemed Fordham Law School. I also have taught at my alma mater, University of Pennsylvania Law School, where I served on the board. And I wanted to teach because my father was a role model. And I remember when I first started teaching at Fordham, I proudly said to him, "I'm going to be teaching courses at Fordham." And he said to me, "Why are you doing that? You work so hard." And I said, "Well, Dad, because I, wanted to follow in your footsteps and make you proud." And he said to me, "Well, I always wanted to be a lawyer." So life has certain ironies anyway. So.
Well, thank you for that, for sharing that with us. And Deputy Chancellor, how about you? Tell us about you and your background and what brought you into the current position that you're in today.
Absolutely. Well, the person that inspired me the most, without a doubt, is my brother. And my brother was born with cerebral palsy and an intellectual disability, and it's just the two of us. And, my parents really struggled to come to terms with his disability, and they had a girl and then a boy, and there was only going to be two of us, and they had a baby boy that was going to struggle in many ways. And there was so much about his experience that I took on. And my biggest wish as a kid was to make us both equal and to figure out a way that he could walk the path that I walked. And I think really my work has been my commitment to trying to make him equal and make all kids that I serve equal, and to carve a path for them that is different than the one he needed to travel, and is one that really recognizes and celebrates the difference that we all bring. And that's what our division is about, and that's what our work at New York City Public Schools is about, is making sure that every child is seen for who they are and seen for their gifts, no matter what challenges they might bring.
I definitely want to talk about the division that you head up, but I would like to know a little bit more about your background and part of your career path prior to becoming the Deputy Chancellor.
Sure. Well, I thought I wanted to be a pediatrician. And the constant there is children. I knew that I wanted to work with children in some way or another. And I finished almost all of the pre-med requirements, and I decided at the last minute that I wanted to change my major and changed my major to sociology, mostly because I was so deeply interested in social justice and what does it look like to deconstruct many of the structures that have created inequities in our country, and whether that be from a disability perspective or a race perspective or an economic perspective, all of it remains of great interest and passion to me. And the work I do now is at the intersection of all of it, which has been an exciting evolution. And so, leaving college, I again knew I wanted to work with children, and so I applied to the New York City Teaching Fellows Program, and I graduated in May, and that June got my first job as a middle school teacher. And I was teaching overage boys who had significant emotional disabilities. There was a lot of acting out, a lot of violent behaviors, a lot of mental illness. I was very grateful for my undergraduate experience as a rugby player, because the physicality of that never, I didn't blink an eye, and they saw that was not going to make me run out of the classroom. And that's really what they needed to see, is that somebody was going to stick with them no matter what. And I did. And in that year, I taught sixth grade. It was the most transformational year, I'd say, of my career. I loved each of them for who they were, no matter what their experience was. In fact, their experiences made me love them more as a teacher. And I remember very clearly the first parent-teacher conference, and I got dressed up in my best outfit and sat patiently in my room. The room was sparkling. I'd bleached every one of those desks, made sure everything was in the perfect spot, and I waited, and I waited, and I had called parents and said, I hope that you'll join, and I expected somebody to come, and one parent came, and she walked in the door and screamed and yelled at me the entire time, and I thought, there's clearly something else here. There's something beyond what I'm seeing going on. And I was determined to form a relationship with her. I was determined to form a relationship with her son. I still see his beautiful face. I see one of their faces in my mind's eye. And later that year, after he had an incredibly successful year, she called me and said, Christina, I'm so sorry that I was so hard on you at the beginning. I was terrified. And I said, I felt that you were terrified. And she said, I was terrified because I'm sick. I'm really sick. Mm. And she wanted him to be okay. And she wanted to set him up for success. And
I'm going to start crying here.
No, don't do that, First Deputy Mayor. We need you to stay in action. And it all made sense in that moment. And even though I felt that there was something profound there, it all made sense. And so I kept teaching, and I loved it. And my mission was to get all of them to read and to get them out of District 75, which is a district for students with the most significant disabilities in the city. And the reason I wanted to get them out of District 75 is because I knew that they could be part of their school, their communities, their local schools, where they could go to school close to home and be on a track towards graduation. And my last year teaching, I had an 8th grade class, and each one of them went on to an inclusive program. And from there, I became all the things that teachers who want to learn more become. I became a literacy coach, and then an assistant principal, and then I was a principal of a school that was a persistently dangerous school. It had that designation when I took it over, and we turned it into a model school, a model emotional literacy school recognized by Yale University, and a showcase school. And we did that in 5 years, and it was also a remarkable journey. And then I was asked to run the special education office, and I've been
surprise.
I've been doing that for quite a while, and then Chancellor Banks wanted to really recognize the work and formed a division. And although I've been a lifelong special educator, we took the Office of Multilingual Learners under our wing. 2 very different populations, but a similar experience of often being on the margins. And so I see our work as putting them in the center of our decision making and elevating their voices.
That's terrific, and 2 terrific stories. I guess I'll share my story because I think we all have something in common here. As you know, I'm an attorney. I didn't start out as a special education attorney. I was a corporate attorney, and really disenchanted with my experience in that realm, and I didn't really feel like I was making much of a difference to anything or anybody. And I woke up one day and I thought, well, what else can I do? And I decided to leave law and become a teacher. Mm-hmm. And I became a high school history teacher at an all-girls private school in Westchester. And then I became the dean of students there. And it was through that experience we were getting more and more students with learning differences, and I was really eager to figure out how we could meet those needs as a college preparatory high school, and not a school that was focused on special needs, and lots of people being in denial that these students had special needs, but there were quite a few with learning differences. Very bright, of course, but just, challenged. And then I have 2 nephews with autism. So I was very interested in how I could help all of these students. And I then learned that there was an entire field dedicated to helping families with children with disabilities. And then I transitioned out of teaching and back into law, which I thought I would never, ever do. And I've been representing families for 17 years now. So it's been a journey. My father was a huge influence to me as well. He was a trial attorney. He was also the vice president of the Yonkers School Board at some point during the 1970s. He was chairperson of a political party in Yonkers, and yes, a very big influence on me and the paths that I followed. And when I told him I wanted to go to law school, he tried to talk me out of it and said, go get your PhD and become a college professor. It's the greatest life in the world. And I said, no, Dad, I'm going to be an attorney. And I did, and I love being an attorney now. And I have also served as an adjunct law professor at Fordham Law School. So I feel like we've all been doing something very meaningful for ourselves and for people around us. So again, thank you for joining us. Deputy Mayor, recently you were interviewed, I think it was Pix 11, and during that interview you said that your goal was delivering the best results for New Yorkers. How do you see positive results for students in this country, in this city? And perhaps the Deputy Chancellor could also weigh in on that.
Okay. Well, there are many things that we are talking about right now Some of them will be announced later this week. Some of them were announced last week, and some of them will be announced in the context of the budget. In New York City, we have an obligation under state law to spend 25% or more of our budget on public education. I think we spend more than 30% of our budget on public education. And, it is obviously by far the largest public school system in the country. Last week we announced over 3,700 new teachers will be hired. Why is that so important? And why is it so difficult for some commentators to understand the significance of that? Class size matters. When you have smaller class size, the data is unassailable that results in better outcomes for students who get more direct attention in the classroom. So the fact that there will now be 3,700 plus more teachers will help us reduce class size and honor the commitment to give as much individual attention to every student as we can to improve outcomes for students. And we'll be announcing funding for certain very important programs that also go to early childhood development. And the commitment here in this administration to support early childhood development, even as some others at the state and federal levels are pulling back. And we have been talking among ourselves, and since I arrived at City Hall, about other initiatives that we want to pursue that we think will improve outcomes. Special education, which obviously is your area, Tracey, of expertise, and the Deputy Chancellor's lifelong commitment to improving in that area, and helping kids get into an inclusive classroom environment. Kids who come from all sorts of backgrounds, some of them multilingual, many of them with learning issues. No child should be left behind, and it is so important what we do with special education. So I especially admire the Deputy Chancellor's commitment, career-long commitment to improving outcomes in that area, and obviously the work that you do, Tracey, to make sure that they get the individualized learning programs that they need.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, one in 36 kids nationally, right, is on the spectrum or is presenting some level of neurodiversity. We're actually seeing our kindergarten numbers in New York City outpacing that, and so our projections for the incoming kindergarten class are higher than we even accounted for. That said, every child will receive a seat and every child will land in good hands. But the reality is that special education needs are going to be in every classroom. And our work is about equipping every teacher to become a teacher of children with disabilities. And I think we really need to reframe how we think about disability, right? Neurodiversity needs to be something that is celebrated and accepted as a part of the society we live in, because at those rates, it is true that it's incredibly prevalent, and everyone that we encounter may have that. Whether it be the doctor that my mom was telling me that she saw a doctor the other day, and the doctor didn't make many facial expressions and seemed uncaring and cold, and asked questions and promptly left the room. And I said, "Well, Mom, he maybe he was on the spectrum, right? And maybe this is just the way his learning differences show up for him." And as the mother of a child with a disability, now adult, all of a sudden that changed the way she saw her experience in the office. And I think we need to be very, very mindful that this is the experience for so many people that we know and love and that we will encounter. And what can we do to make sure that people with neurodiversity or autism don't have to adjust their way of being to make us comfortable?
It's a very good point. And that's going to take a lot of teaching of the rest of us. But starting in the young grades and having these inclusive environments definitely impacts the students who are considered general education. And perhaps there won't be that big separation anymore of who is special education and who is general education. And as you and I both know, special education is not a place.
That's right.
It's a constellation of services to help the students learn to the best of their ability.
That's right. That's right.
So you are heading up DIAL, DIAL. Why don't you tell us what that is and what you're hoping to get from this?
Yeah. So DIAL is the Division of Inclusive and Accessible Learning. And what we're hoping to get out of it is to create every classroom where every child is accepted and again celebrated for who they are. Now, what does that mean? What does it look like? Well, we have these world-class autism programs, Tracey, that you know of, that we don't have enough of, that we need more of. And I'll use my opportunity with the first deputy mayor to make my plug as well. And in those classrooms, kids are outperforming their peers without disabilities. We have a 97% graduation rate, 4-year graduation rate for students with autism that attend those classes. Really remarkable. I'll be walking in Prospect Park. I live in Brooklyn. And one parent came up to me one day and said, "You changed my life." And I said, "I'm sorry, who are you?" And they said, "Doesn't matter. My son's in a NEST program. He's 5 years old. He attended kindergarten. He just had his first play date. He's never had a play date."
Yeah.
And that's because the NEST program teaches social skills and teaches kids how to communicate with each other so that they do know what to say when they're on a play date and they do know what not to throw the toys. And even though I don't think there's any 5-year-old that knows that lesson completely yet, but they have the relationships are facilitated in a way. And what that 5-year-old turns into is a graduate. In high school, and that's the remarkable investment, right? Versus the experience that my kids had when I was a teacher, right? Where their experience was, I failed at school, I'm not good at school, everybody thinks I'm a problem, and changing that in middle school was, it was a complete labor of love. And the way that I changed it was teaching them to read, right? And then putting them in inclusive environments after that. But so what we're finding in those NEST classrooms is that the pedagogical, the teaching practices that work in those classrooms work everywhere. And so it's not that we're just teaching to the student with autism.
Correct.
The best practices are the best practices. And if you're a general education teacher in a general education environment, chances are, based on the percentages we just talked about, you're going to have a child with autism in your class. So let's make sure that you, the general educator, can welcome, embrace, and teach well to the student that's in front of you. And so that, in a nutshell, on the special education side of the world, is really what we're working to do. So building districts' capacity to teach kids on the spectrum, building districts' capacity to teach kids who are dyslexic and have learning disabilities and maybe challenges with their executive function. Building districts' capacity to teach a child who has a speech and language delay, right? So, and the list goes on. But what we're doing is using that district capacity building model to then impact those principals who will really make the changes where it matters the most, right? All of the research says that the special educator or the teacher in front of the child is the child's biggest determinant of success. If that's a high-quality teacher, kids are going to succeed. If that teacher's struggling, we have our chances decrease dramatically. And so making sure that in a system this large that the learning gets to the teachers is really the biggest, I think that's the biggest piece of our puzzle. And having this division positions us to do that.
I agree with you 100% that teachers who understand learning differences, autism, no matter what they're branded as, general education teachers or special education teachers, really will make a significant impact, positive impact for our students.
Right,
and our own mayor has a history
That's
of
right.
Being in special education.
dyslexic.
That's right.
Yeah. And it did not go very well for him. And I remember him telling a story about how he was beaten up by one of his teachers.
That's right. Yes, and I have to tell you, Tracy, I have never gotten so much FaceTime with the mayor as I have gotten with Mayor Adams. And that is because he deeply cares about this issue. He deeply cares about this topic. It was incredibly important that he elevated our division so that he knows that he has a decision maker at the table that can advocate. So whenever a decision is made about literacy in New York City Reads, he knows that we have somebody there who's going to say, hey, we can't think about special education after we roll out New York City Reads, right? We have to think about special education from the start because the retrofitting really doesn't work. But when we build the structure from the beginning to recognize the needs of all kids, then our chances of success are so much higher. And so that has really been a true gift that Mayor Adams has given us. And he is so invested in outcomes for kids.
Yeah,
And good for him that he's been so open in talking about that painful experience. And to see him today as a role model, as a public speaker, I mean, he's remarkable. He doesn't use a note. He's a very charismatic speaker. But to talk about his personal experiences, the personal experiences he had as a kid at the hands of the police
Yes.
so many years ago, as a child growing up with a disability who was almost left behind, dyslexia. It's and there's so much that can be done when we recognize the inherent value in every child and try and nurture that. I'm reminded of an experience with a very famous lawyer who I worked for exclusively for a period of a couple of years, named David Boyce. And David Boyce was a remarkable trial room lawyer. And I did a 6-month trial with him as a third-year associate. He did 90% of it. He let, me and a couple of other associates do a few witnesses. But we went to court, and it was a big case, Westmoreland versus CBS at the time, famous general. It was about the Vietnam War and whether CBS libeled him by saying he intentionally understated the size of the enemy we faced. And it was daily press. It was a huge case at the time. Openings. He gives a 2-hour opening without a note, and just this flawless, beautiful opening. He would do cross-examinations with, a few file folders, but nothing written out, just sort of this innate intelligence. And I said to myself, because I was going to go to the U.S. Attorney's Office right after that trial, I'm going to train myself to do it that way. I'm going to train myself to do my arguments and my courtroom performances without a note. And it is hard, really, really hard. And years later, I read David Boyce's autobiography, and he admits that he was dyslexic. So he had to learn those skills to overcome his disability. Right. And he's one of the most brilliant lawyers of the 20th century. So.
I don't know if you remember this, but I remember being in the Second Circuit Court of Appeals where we were both there for one case. I was with a different firm at the time, and my boss was arguing a case, and I was there with him. And you were there arguing a case, and I think it was a pro bono case that you were arguing.
It was. You're bringing up
I
did well that day, but I remember the case so well. Yes.
I remember you not using any notes whatsoever when you went up to the podium, and I remarked on that to you later. Like, how did you do that?
Well, I learned it from David Boies, but I didn't realize he had to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think the statistic is 20% of the population is dyslexic. So that's 1 in 5 students has dyslexia. And these students require a very specific approach to learning how to read. And is there anything in the works for specifically for students with dyslexia?
Absolutely, so much. Well, the first thing is, New York City Reads has been transformational because it's moved us out of the balanced literacy approach and into the science of reading. And the science of reading is all based on phonics. And the curriculum that we're using in kindergarten and 2nd grade, which has been mandated, is a phonics-based curriculum. Now, the important part of this is, of course, that it's mandated, right? Because folks can't choose whether or not they're going to teach phonics. Every school is expected to choose. But we have chosen curriculum that is based in an approach that is good for all kids, but also really good for kids with dyslexia. It's the most tried and true approach. It's called Orton-Gillingham, and this
It's the gold standard.
It's the gold standard. And so in every kindergarten classroom, we are using programs that are steeped in that approach so that if a child is experiencing trouble learning to read because of a print-based disability, dyslexia, or anything else, a processing issue, whatever the root cause might be, they have immediate access to this because that's what we're using for everybody. And that, to me, is the best example of what does it look like to build a system that a child can walk into a classroom, whatever they bring, the practices are such that their needs are met. And so that has been, a foundational shift that is remarkable and certainly demonstrative of where we need to go as a system.
That is really great news. What's the message you'd like to send to parents today, parents of students here in New York City?
Yeah. Well, I think on a personal note, what I've learned about being someone who loves deeply a person with a disability is that hope is essential, and a belief in what is possible is really essential. And I would say that holding that hope and then acting upon it is a key part of this. And as an educator, I see my job as ensuring that parents always have an opportunity to feel that hope, and to create that for parents has been one of the greatest gifts of certainly my lifetime, is to know that kids are benefiting from the work we do. And of course, scale is our biggest challenge. We know what to do. People all over the globe come to visit our programs. You don't really hear about them because, when we have a 92% compliance rate, that's not 100% compliance. And in that 8% are thousands and thousands of children. Right. So, yes, there are over 200,000 students with disabilities. But until we're at 200,000, our work is not good enough. It's certainly not good enough for me. And it's not good enough for the parent that's child's not getting the services. The second part of that is also making sure that we're giving the right services, right? In terms of investments, we have to see a return on our investment because that from a fiscal standpoint, across the country, we're seeing that as the rates in autism rise and other disabilities, districts are putting more and more and more money. And we have one of the highest per pupil expenditures, hands down, in New York City for special education. But the more is not better, right? If you give a child occupational therapy, physical therapy, speech in kindergarten, and they miss literacy instruction, right? It's not having the impact. But when we're investing in the programs that work, which are the ones that are, people from all over the country truly come to visit our programs. Denmark has replicated them. We've hosted South Korea. We've hosted Ukraine. The First Lady of Ukraine came for 2 years in a row to start, and with our guidance and collaboration, was able to get her students in rural Ukraine on buses into schools, and she was talking to us about advice about how to do that, and came to us 2 years in a row. So we know what to do. We definitely need the fiscal infrastructure to do it. Otherwise, we're in this perpetual state of, whether it be through litigation, we don't have the seats to offer children. Therefore, they pursue private schools rightfully, and that is absolutely a choice that parents have to make if they feel that the public school can't offer the service that's going to impact their child the way that they know that they deserve. Hands down, that needs to happen. But we also need to make sure that parents have that choice.
Yeah, it's an important choice. Special education, but public education is so important to our country, to our city. To have children who can be educated for free is extraordinary, and it needs to be good quality education. Otherwise, like you said, we're not getting the bang for our buck. So with
Tracey, before you ask that question, could I just ask that just try to be careful not to tap your hands on the table, just because the mics are on the table.
The Italian in me, I apologize.
I was going to say, I have two Italian people here.
I know. Just tap your knee. Thank you.
Well, we were talking about, or you were talking about, how the move in the educational programming here in New York City is moving from balanced literacy to phonics-based instruction. I was taught to read with phonics-based instruction. Were you?
I was.
Do you remember how you learned to read, Deputy
Letter
Mayor?
sounds?
I don't recall. All I know is that I read. I can't remember for sure. I really can't remember. Phonics-based instruction.
Phonics, which
I
was...
don't think it was phonics-based.
What does a snake say?
See, well,
all those sounds.
I should have.
That we would make.
I'd be an even faster reader if I had phonics. But I don't think I had phonics.
You probably did. You probably did.
You think so?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there you go.
You probably did. But it moved, I think, in the 80s to balanced literacy. Prior to that, it was phonics-based. And my sister, my eldest sister is 16 years older than me. And she is a reading specialist, and that was her career. And I learned to read really because of her, because she was teaching children how to read, so she thought she would use me as her guinea pig. So I remember phonics-based learning because of my sister, and she got me reading at age 3. Thank you, Christine,
Phenomenal.
for that. Yes.
But I think something struck me about what the Deputy Chancellor said, and she talked about parental involvement and parental choice. We can never take for granted how important it is for parents to be invested in their kids' educations, and it's why in my government role, not as an educator, but as an executive and an administrator, I've always thought in terms of getting parents involved and giving them choices in the curriculum that make sense. Because when parents make a choice, they are invested in seeing that it works for their kid. And then they will be involved because they have helped chart the course in consultation, obviously, with educational professionals. But I think parental choice, where we have options, really can help generate even better outcomes, because the parents will not only have made the choice, they'll be invested in seeing that the choice works for their child, because it's also on them.
What do you mean by parental choice when you use that term?
Well, from the special education lens, just want to start there. You have a child, they have significant needs. And a parent has the weight of knowing that the earlier that a child gets the services and the supports they need, the better. And, we live in a city where you're assigned a school, and the assumption is that your home zone school is going to be able to serve you. And for most people, that is true. But if you're a parent of a child with a significant disability, that's not always true. And then one has to figure out how to navigate that. Just tangentially, we just did this pilot in 3 districts. For every kindergarten family that was leaving preschool into the kindergarten, we offered them a specialized program, so an autism program, one of those high-quality programs that's graduating at 97%. We received the funding to allow us to offer every family who wanted one a specialized program in kindergarten. And what we saw is that we had 1,000 applicants for 60 seats to one of the programs. What we saw is also that, one of the first town halls I went to after the school year started, a family raised their hand and said they had two children and a little boy with autism. And the mom said, I just need to say thank you because he started kindergarten and he's going to school with his sister and they walk to school together. I'm able to walk both of them. So there's no getting on a school bus. Normally, typically what happens is your child with a disability gets on a school bus and you hold the hand of his sibling and they get to walk to school with their parent or their grown-up, whoever that might be. And therein lies the inequity that we're trying to combat with such fervor. So in that, parents got a choice. They got to say, you know what, I really think District 75 is the right place. Or they got to say, you know what, your specialized programs, and of course this is part of the team meeting, right? So parent isn't, if we thought the parent was going in a direction that we didn't think would meet the child's needs, we of course would say, Mom, let's talk about what this means, and or they have the choice to pursue litigation and pursue litigation that would allow them to go to a charter school or a private school. Now, the fact that those are choices is deeply important to me because we've already, a parent of a child with a disability is already operating within a world of constraints. And the more doors we can unlock for families, the better. I just want to make sure we're unlocking the right doors that lead to the right outcomes. And so that pilot was profound because we got to give everybody equitable access to these programs that we know children are going to graduate. So they're starting at 5, and we know with decades of our work here that they're going to do great. And that is, I'm so sorry. I keep tapping. We know that is, that's just bringing dreams into reality, literally, for families, and it's remarkable.
So the pilot program, is this, I'm assuming you're going to build on this and make this much more available to
So we're hoping to.
students?
Yeah, we're certainly hoping to build on that pilot. It does come down to funding, but you also always, as a teacher, you have to have an alternate plan when your lesson plan doesn't work out. And so, our backup plan here is that we're going to take the learnings of our pilot and teach districts what we learned in policy and practice, so that we can have outcomes even if the programs don't exist. And so our work is going to continue with or without funding. And we've learned a lot from that pilot. And certainly we've learned the benefit of kids being closer to home, and of making sure that schools are equipped with the teaching practices they need to succeed. And so in either direction, we're gonna move forward to make sure that kids have access to their schools.
Glad to hear it. So what does inclusion mean to you? We've used the word a lot here today, and it means something different to just about everybody. What does it mean to you?
Yeah. And I'm curious to hear what our first deputy mayor, what he thinks about this. But I'll go first and quickly tell you. For years we've talked about inclusion, and we've used analogies like inclusion is not only being invited to the dance, but being asked to dance, or inclusion is about having a seat at the table. And I get that, but I don't think it's it. And the reason I don't think that's where we need to go is that it still gives the power to everybody else, right? So I'm waiting for the invitation, right? If I'm the person with a disability, I'm waiting to be invited to the dance, and then hopefully somebody will ask me to dance. When every child should show up to that dance and dance their hearts out, no matter what, and feel great about themselves. And so I am really trying to move us past even beyond this concept of inclusion. And, rightful presence is a term that a lot of folks are being trained on, which is we all have the right to be present in our full selves. But ultimately, it really means that there's no question about an invitation. Of course you have a seat at the table. There's no question about whether or not you go to the dance. Of course you should dance, and you should, be at the center of that experience.
And Deputy Mayor?
Wow, well, she said that so beautifully. I'm going to have a hard time following up on that. But I actually use the term in a somewhat different context. There are some kids who need special help, right? Mm-hmm. They're not ready for the mainstream classroom. They're not ready for the English-only language classroom right away, right? And they need special help. And we need to give them that special help. So when I talk about inclusion, I mean every kid getting into that mainstream classroom where they're not behind, where they're not behind in English language skills or behind in the tools they need because of disabilities or otherwise to be in that classroom with the rest of the class. And the aim is to do as much as we can as quickly as possible to get them to that place. So that's what I mean by inclusion.
It is true that there are students that are going to continue to need specialized services that are presented to them in an environment that is dedicated to that. And I think what I'm hearing from the Deputy Chancellor and from the Deputy Mayor here today is that we'd like to be able to move that along a little bit more so that there is inclusivity, so that the children who are not neurodiverse, although I wonder if that's true of anybody, but with the children who are considered neurodiverse can all learn together.
That's right.
So it's a fading in type of process is the way I'm hearing it.
Yeah, by using practices that work for everyone, right?
Yeah.
As the norm.
So what are, I think we've talked about your hopes and aspirations for the students. Now, the question I always ask my guests is, if you had a magic wand and you could make anything a reality, what would you do in your position as Deputy Chancellor?
I would make it so that every child can leave their home and be in walking, wheeling, however they get to school, distance, and be welcomed in a school that is going to give them the highest quality education that they can find. And not only that they're seen and celebrated, like truly seen for who they are.
And Deputy Mayor Mastro, if you had a Superman cape on that you could put on and make anything a reality, what would it be?
He just hung it up outside for the interview, but he'll put it back on when he leaves.
Ironically, I was once given one, and I keep it in my office on a coat rack. But in any event, I guess I view it from the lens of the first deputy mayor, who is responsible for interacting in so many ways with so many aspects of city government. If I could wave a magic wand, I'd want New York City to be a shining example of a place where families can grow and prosper, everyone in the family. And that means great education. That means economic opportunity. That means public safety, job one, to keep families safe, to keep people in our city safe. And finally, a quality of life. As wonderful and joyous as families can be, that they live in a city that gives them a quality of life they deserve. We are doing so many things. I can't take credit for them only 2 weeks into the job, but they're doing so many things. Major crime is falling dramatically in the first quarter of this year. Record job growth, the highest number of jobs in city history, and more small businesses than ever before in city history. And affordable housing, ability for people to make a home for their families here. This administration, in a landmark legislative initiative called the City of Yes, that one initiative created over 80,000 units of affordable housing. Overall, the administration has created 130,000 units of affordable housing. That is truly historic, by an order of magnitude more than was created in the de Blasio or the Bloomberg administrations, which were much longer. So many great things have been happening. I hope that the next 9 months will be a period of continued and enormous productivity and progress. But we're headed in the right direction as a city. But you asked me to wave that magic wand, and that magic wand is, a shining city of opportunity and quality of life, where families can live in harmony and have great opportunity in the future, great education, great economic prospects, great quality of life.
Well, thank you. That goes back to what you were talking about earlier, Deputy Chancellor, which is hope. So I think we're hopeful that this can happen. We have some evidence that it already has happened, and it sounds like an exciting future for the city. So thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate your time, and hope you'll come back again.
Thank you, Tracy. It's a pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the Deputy Chancellor and the Chancellor for all they do and are doing for the New York's kids. So thank you.
Thank you. The gratitude is very mutual.
Thank you.